Hi there, welcome to The Sacred Journey. The Sacred Journey is the program that reminds you that life is a wonderful adventure and each and every experience we have is a unique and perfect opportunity for learning. I'm Joyce St. Germain. Tonight's show, A Poet's Journey, reflecting on rejection. And I'm so happy to have a poet with me, Alyssa May Trifone. And Alyssa and I have known each other since she was 8 or 9.
Single digits.
Yeah,
yes.
A long time ago. And I've known your family for quite a while, and for years I've been trying to get you to come and share your tremendous talent. So
Thank you so much.
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And it has been quite a journey.
A little bit, to say the least.
Walk us through a little bit of it.
Well, I think I started writing when I first started learning how to talk. And from there, I've been able to work through a lot of it. So since early childhood, writing has always been the way that I've looked to understand the world around me. I vividly remember being single digits, maybe around the time I met you.
It was like 8 or 9, I want to say.
Yeah, well, I would have known how to write by then, I hope. And I was sitting out on my front yard, and my mother was with me, and I started telling her a poem about the leaf birds I saw in the sky.
Wait, your poem?
Mm-hmm.
Or someone else's
No,
poem?
I started narrating a poem that I was writing in my head on the spot, and my mother was kind enough to bring me inside and type it all down on the computer. That was before I learned how to type and write and all that sort of stuff.
I don't know that I had heard that. Now, just for a little family history, family background, your mom's a therapist.
My mom is a therapist, yes.
And your dad recently passed away, dear
Yes.
friend, teacher, writer, scientist.
Songwriter.
That's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, extraordinary. And I know that we'll get into another show a little bit about the role of writing in the grieving process. So I'll invite our viewers to stay on. So, okay, 8 or 9 years old, you just sort of orate this poem and your insightful mom writes it down. Fast forward. What happened in the meantime?
Well, in the meantime, in terms of my personal history or writing
Whatever
history,
you want to share. I know it's kind of a big...
it is a very big question.
Yeah, and I know it's pretty all interrelated.
It's very interrelated. Fast forward a couple years, I went to art school in New Haven. This is when I was a teenager, so I was a little bit older. That was my first experience with taking a poetry class. It was an elective. I took the visual art classes there for the most part. I like to study photography and painting and all that kind of stuff. I took poetry as an elective, and I sort of just immediately got hooked in, even more than I already was. My dad, being the teacher that he was, really encouraged that also, the writing that I did. So yeah.
Okay, and I know you'll be sharing, because I begged, sharing
I'd
some
love
of
to.
your
I'd
poems
love
with
to.
us. And I am not a critic. I was an art teacher. I taught art. The way that the non-professional writer or critic, I describe your poetry as the most authentic poems I have ever read, that there is not one syllable or letter that it's like, they're saying that just because they think it's going to have this effect. No, they're saying this because that's how they feel. Your stuff is so powerful.
Thank you so much. That's something I've certainly tried to do in my writing, is being more honest with myself, with others as the audience. We titled the show The Reflecting on the Rejections.
Yeah, how come?
And I think that is super important. In my journey as a poet, the more I've started to write and submit and try to get my work out in the world, especially during the pandemic in the last year when we were all kind of stuck at home in quarantine. A lot of my favorite poets started offering online workshops. One of them was taught by Megan Falley, who's a pretty well-known poet. She is absolutely incredible. Her workshop series culminated in the advice that we should all try to collect 100 rejection letters from any kind of publisher.
100.
100. And that is 100 times that you have been brave enough to put your voice in the world. That is 100 times that somebody else has read your work, evaluated your work, critiqued it maybe. And it also, I mean, you're going to get the rejections. That's true of any artist, of any art career, I think. You really have to believe in yourself and your work and keep going and understand that the rejections, okay, well maybe this piece was just not right for this particular publication, so where else can I bring it? Or how can I tweak it to make it so that maybe it will be published with these people if I really want it there.
So it invites you deeper into the creative process.
I think it can, absolutely, and that's all about the perspective, and that advice kind of clicked a light bulb in my head, and I was like, you know, I can do that. I can get 100 rejections, absolutely.
It's an unusual goal, but
Not at all thinking about the fact that I'd have to write all these poems and edit all these poems and submit all these poems and find all these places. There's more that goes into it, but that's all part of the process as well.
It's a lot of dedication, obviously.
It's a lot of work. You don't just have I mean, maybe sometimes you have a moment of genius and you just write down a brilliant poem and you don't need to touch it at all, but I think that's not really true of my process as a writer anyway. It's sort of the same thing as anything else. You start with a rough draft, you start with something very raw and new and maybe emotional. And through the editing processes, as you look through it, read it at open mics, offer it to your partner or your mother or somebody else to read, it tweaks a little bit more and grows into itself.
Okay, and at the end of the show, we will give people contact info for you if they want to find out where you're going to be meeting, what's coming up, and we will share a little bit about you know, what's up your sleeve creatively, but maybe to find out how they can, you know, hear more of your poetry or hear more about poetry in general. So we'll have your contact info for people.
That sounds wonderful.
You know, people are sitting there going, when do we get to hear a poem? Do you want to keep talking a little bit about your history and then get into the poems like near the end, or do you want to scatter them? You're in charge here.
Well, we can sort of scatter them. I'd be happy to start out reading one
Okay.
now,
Love to
if
hear.
that is okay. It's all on my phone because that is just the times we're in.
Technology, can't do without it. And I know your poems are so moving, I'm wishing I had a box of tissue here, but we'll be good.
Well, I hope that won't be necessary.
Well, sometimes they're that powerful.
This was the first poem I read at an open mic on a stage. So it holds a soft spot in my heart a little bit. While driving to the open mic, I consider turning down every street except the one the open mic is actually on. The most inviting streets are cul-de-sacs, easy to turn around on, and one-ways, as long as they're leading in the opposite direction of the stage. Imagining the audience in their underwear does not help. I don't typically yell about big feelings and small moments in front of people in their underwear. It will take every stubborn fiber in me not to escape out the bathroom window before it is my turn to speak. I've climbed through plenty of windows in the past. I'm always locking myself out of places I'm supposed to be, while always trying to deadbolt the doors of what came before. The past still has its teeth deep in my shoulders. It is poison ivy coiled around my vocal cords, a boa constrictor squeezing the life out of my throat. Even my screams are stuttered. The past is the ghost haunting the attic of my psyche. The past is a man convincing me that my voice isn't worth being heard. I turn onto the right street and force my hands to steady. The past pulls at me from the back seat, urges me to start the car, drive away, and forget all about this stupid dream of being a poet. But I step out of the car anyway, into the future, which is not to say that this is a pretty ending. The future is my armpits staining my shirt in pools of anxious sweat, imagining the audience laughing as I stammer towards the microphone. The future is me being so stage scared, my tongue tangles worse than a box full of Christmas lights. But the future is knowing that when one light goes out, we all do. So the future is me with my light on, speaking scriptless. The future is me telling the truth.
Wow, I had to reach for the tissue. And it's not sadness that it evokes. It is just so incredibly moving when you see and feel and hear someone's true essence. And I don't use that expression, true essence, tritely. And knowing you as long as I've known you. Powerful, and I'm sure to some people very inspiring.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And
Poetry has always been a way that I felt I could express myself, at least on the page. And recently I've tried to get myself more out there into the world and reading at open mics and anywhere I can.
Now there'll be more events now that, we're hopefully almost post-pandemic.
I would hope so, certainly. I would certainly hope so. I don't particularly know of anything that I will be at right now. If I do, I will certainly keep everybody posted.
Okay.
It's definitely been a weird year in terms of performance art of any kind with COVID and everything.
Yeah.
You couldn't really do the whole open mic things. There was an event I was invited to that was online. It was virtual, which was very interesting.
I was there, I remember.
It was
unusual.
It was an interesting way to do an event like that. Successful, I think.
It was.
But yeah, the whole world has certainly had to adapt in a really weird way.
And for the outsider looking in on, expressions of creativity, and if we can call them finished products, I mean, the thing that you present, the sculpture, the painting, the poem, how does it get to that point? And when or how does something become the focus of a poem? Because we have everyday events every second of our lives. For you, what happens that you go, I need to express this, I need to write about it, I need to maybe explain, I'm putting words in your mouth and I don't mean to, but what I'm saying is, what happens from how you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, that makes it become a poem?
Writing is so much a necessity for me that it's almost like life is the poem and I'm just trying to translate it all the time and get it all down as fast as I can. Inspiration to write can come from anything. It can come from not writing at all and knowing I need to. It can come from nature. Often it comes from personal experience. I'm inspired the most when I'm reading other poets, when I'm reading other poetry.
And that shows a lack of ego, by the way.
That's
People
the
with
best
big
way to learn.
egos don't want to read other people's work, view other people's work.
That's
So.
the best way to learn, I would say, and the best way to submit as well. If you look in the back of some of your favorite books, they often list where that author has previously been published. Often I go through my favorite books to get ideas for where I'd like to submit my own work. So if you're interested in poetry and writing poetry, the best place to start is by reading it.
Okay, and I'm making a statement to our viewing audience, and our viewing audience, I don't know, I want to say millions, but I know it's not. But we've been doing the show over 25 years. I am putting out there that I see you teaching,
I would love to.
inspiring, guiding. Okay, you heard it here first.
That is the intention.
Okay, because I think people who do things beautifully, if they have it in them, or if they can somehow pull it up from somewhere to teach and inspire, I think that doubles the gift of the book.
I would agree.
And again, that's a lack of ego, being willing to share your gifts and inspire other people to find theirs. Can we have another one?
Of course. Let me see what I've got in here. This is the one, forgot I put this in here. It was the one that I read at the online event that you were at. That's all right.
Yeah.
It's called Fat Joke, after Patricia Lockwood. The funniest part of the fat joke is when the fat joke starts to believe it is fat, even though it is not, even though I never was. It wasn't even on purpose. That's part of the fat joke too, the utter hysterical accident of it all. It started when the toothy sadness in my brain started swallowing all the crumbs of my appetite away, without me even noticing until it was gone. One day I was reaching for crackers in my lunch at school. The other girls asked me if I had lost weight, told me I looked good. It had to be the only time they hadn't laughed at me first. I put the crackers away, not opening the box. And just like that, the fat joke realizes it can avoid the punchline altogether if it can just stay in control of the fat joke to begin with. But every joke gets old in time, loses its humor, its taste. Even the funniest fat joke ever told becomes unfunny if told enough. And by this I mean other people started to notice I wasn't kidding when I said I thought I was fat. Once they saw my collarbone clean as a cutting board, my wrists as small as the wings of a baby bird. That was when the hospital bed started to feel more like home than mine did. Months of my life spent curled up a feral ball of sweat in white starched sheets. Months spent eating hospital food, just to get out of the hospital, only to land back in weeks later, eventually recovering just enough to slip under the radar of doctors, but still hating the sweet nest of my body, though it never deserved to be so loathed. It never deserved to be so loathed. The moment I realize that, the whole entire fat joke becomes lost on me entirely. Healing begins with teaching my mouth to flavor my inner dialogue with words of tenderness. I spend years repeating over and over into the mirror, "You are beautiful, you are perfect." I write volumes of recipes on how best to nourish the parts of my body I rejected, adorning my nose and stomach with silver rings, my scarred arms becoming deliciously decorated with tattoos. I feast on the tender marrow of resilience that's always been inside my bones, and I don't laugh at fat jokes anymore. I've come to realize that my life is more than a punchline. And yes, I'm still learning how to love my body, but I have learned how to laugh with it. Real belly laughs, you know the type. The kind that fills your whole stomach with joy.
That was so moving and touching now as much as the first time I heard it, because I noticed some subtleties that I don't remember from the first time, or maybe it was so stabbing to me the first time that there wasn't any space in it the first time for me to hear those subtle things, to feel it and know it. And, you know, eating disorders are incredibly prevalent.
Incredibly. I did suffer more when I was younger, when I was an adolescent. Around the time that I was taking that first poetry elective and really starting to read more and trying to find other writers that communicated honestly about their feelings. Honesty and transparency about your own experience is sometimes the only way you're going to get through your experience.
Yeah, and I think listening to someone's honest exposure is incredibly powerful, and I think it's a stepping stone to healing for the listener, too. We have about 2 minutes left, because we chat all the time, and we just can't always wait to get together. Is there anything you want to be sure that our viewers know or understand, or is there a brief poem that you would like to share with our closing? And I will let you close things out, as I thank our viewers for joining us on the Sacred Journey. We'll catch you next time, and I will let you close our show.
Well, I have a shorter poem I'd be happy to read to end things on. A bit of a lighter note. This is a love poem. Humans are the only animals known to blush, meaning at some point in our evolution there was an ancestor who blushed for the first time. What inspired that first flush? What love was so huge it made every vein in the body gasp with pleasure, blood cells slow dancing up the rib cage past the fluttering heart to cheekbones, where they lay together in skin struck rose gold? Was it anything like this? Waking up next to you, your hair tangled, still in argument with the pillowcase. Your long legs are stretching in the early morning sun, staining the window curtains, blush pink with its light. You look at me and smile. My blood trips over itself, clumsy as a first date, rushing to my face where it spreads tender as a lover's hand. My blush knows by instinct to warm at the sight of something beautiful, which is to say, every time you smile at me, I glow.
That's beautiful, and thank you for ending on that lovely, inviting note.
Of course, thank you.